For decades, North America's labor laws have been under attack from big business and anti-union forces. Through it all, the BCTGM's fight to protect worker rights has continued. The biggest obstacles faced by the BCTGM over the last 4 years have been weak labor laws, which have facilitated the intimidation, harassment, and coercion of workers.
First of all, if a worker is discriminated against or legally terminated, there have to be some real penalties on the employers for doing this, because fear is the biggest obstacle to workers deciding to join a union. Every poll that we've looked at has indicated that 50% of the workers in this country would vote for a union if they had a chance to, without fear of losing their job. So we'd like some real penalties, some real teeth put in the labor law for employers who violate the law. The second thing we'd like to see is if a simple majority of the workers sign authorization cards and they decide they want a union, they should immediately go to bargaining. That's the way it should be. The way the laws are set up now, people are fearful to vote in elections, they're just scared of their employers, and that needs to be resolved. And I think the third thing that I'd like to see changed is that when you do win an organizing campaign, that there be mandatory bargaining. And if that bargaining isn't successful within a certain period of time, let's say 120 days, then there should be federal mediation to make sure that a contract does come about.
In the last 4 years alone, right-wing politicians, their allies, and corporate special interests have waged a full-scale, multi-billion-dollar war on workers' democratic rights. Corporate-backed state governments have revoked public employees' collective bargaining rights in Wisconsin, have passed right-to-work-for-less laws to reduce workers' bargaining power in Michigan and Indiana, and have enacted new laws to restrict voting and political participation in no less than 24 states. While corporate CEOs throughout North America take a greater share of the economic pie, workers' wages stagnate and unemployment remains high.
When I became a full-time trade unionist in January of 1983, a CEO's pay was 46 times the average worker. Well, as we sit here today, that number is up to 331 times the average worker that works for that company. So that means the CEO makes more in one day than their workers make in an entire year. And I call that the transfer of wealth, and I think that's one of the big issues. The global system is geared for the wealthiest of the wealthiest.
The decades-long assault on labor has led to a decline in union density, and in turn, a decline in the power of unions to raise wages and living standards for workers. Reversing that trend will depend on political influence exerted by voters, making the union member vote critical to the outcome of elections everywhere.
We have to be involved because that's the only way for us to shape the government and to shape public policy is for our members to be involved in the political process and the legislative process. It's difficult. We recognize often that our members are frustrated with politics, as we all are, but it's the only game in town, and if we're not involved, we know one thing: our adversaries are involved, our employers are involved.
Over the last decade, the percentage of union households that voted was significantly greater than union numbers in the population and workforce as a whole. The 2012 elections brought a wave of victories for working families and the defeat of some anti-worker, anti-union candidates backed by billionaires, as America's workers refused to let their voices be silenced by the nearly $1.5 billion in independent spending that poured into the election. Recognizing the importance of remaining politically involved, BCTGM Local 114 in Portland, Oregon maintains positive working relationships with congressional leaders and state legislators. In fact, U.S. Representative Suzanne Bonamici recently visited Local 114 members at the Oro Wheat Bread Bakery in Beaverton, Oregon. She toured the bakery, spoke with BCTGM members, and learned about the benefits workers at the plant have because of their union membership.
So many of our members think that they live in this isolated little world where it's only the contract, whereas the environment is political, and without friendly politicians and without a political climate that ensures that we can enforce our contracts, their contracts are in danger.
Political involvement by union members at the state and local levels can have tremendous impact. Local 114 member Robin Zimmerman, a union baker, was key to expanding Oregon's Family Medical Leave Act.
Robin Zimmerman was a local 114 member, 35 years, who went through a very difficult time experiencing the care for his wife who was diagnosed with cancer, making difficult choices of earning an income versus taking care of his wife and his young daughter. And during that period of time, he became aware that the state legislature was considering passing a law that allowed a worker to access their sick leave time when caring for a family member.
The legislation, House Bill 2950, faced several hurdles. But Zimmerman, who received broad support from family advocacy groups around the nation, never gave up. He testified twice before the state legislature on behalf of the legislation, and it was passed and signed into law on June 13, 2013 by Oregon Governor John Kitzhaber. The bill makes it mandatory that employers give employees 2 weeks unpaid leave to attend a funeral, make arrangements, grieve, and receive counseling when a family member has died.
And he accomplished this. This was Robin, just a member of ours, on his own. And he was able to do that because we have worker-friendly legislatures that we elected.
Elections have consequences. We say this to our members all the time. The most important thing our members can do is work with their local union leadership, and our local union leadership to work with the AFL-CIO state federations and the AFL-CIO local central labor councils. The BCTGM at all levels, our members, our local officers, and international officers and staff need to be actively involved in that program to continue the success.